Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue building our second Next.js app. This is the 9th video session of our Next.js 14 tutorial series. Today, we will continue with the Form app. Last time we have installed the Next UI library in this app. This time, we will continue with database setup using Prisma. After that, we will work on the Next Auth integration using O-Auth and GitHub. First, start with Prisma installation and setup. We have already discussed the basic Prisma installation in our To-Do app series. You may check out the official docs for details. Start by installing Prisma. The command is simple. After that, initialize it using SQLite as provider source. Once done, we will move on to the model structuring. This time the app is a little complex, so does the model structure. Also, we have to use Next Auth for authentication. That requires some specific tables in our database. Hence, a well-formatted data model is required. Don't worry, it's not that difficult. Most of the Next Auth requirements are given in their official docs. You can copy that and then add your tables according to the app requirements. Our Form app needs 3 specific tables each for topic, post, and comments. If anything seems confusing, then check out the last video or drop a comment. The init command will generate a connection client specific to SQLite. You can choose different providers depending on database type. It will also create a new directory named Prisma in the project root with a default schema file. We have to update this file according to Next Auth specification as well as our app requirement. I have already prepared the model we will need for this app. You can slow down the video to observe the structure carefully. Just let me know if more explanation is required. After finishing the model structure, just save this file. Then run the Prisma migrate command to create the database. It will ask for a name for migrate or change log. Use something specific to the change. Upon completing this command, we'll generate a new database as per given model structure. Apart from this, it will also create all the necessary CRUD controls for each tables in our database. It makes it much easier for manipulate or modify the data in the database. Entire logic will be generated automatically by Prisma. Now, we just have to use these references in our app. Our task with Prisma setup is done with the database generation. Next, we have to install and set up Next Auth with O-Auth. For now, you can pause this video, take a short break, and start the Next Auth section with a fresh mind. Next Auth is a little demanding. In fact, we have to go through quite a few steps to make it work completely. Therefore, watch the next section with your pace and observe everything carefully. Let's start the Next Auth integration with a simple O-Auth app. We are using GitHub for this project. You can add many more channels, including Google, to authenticate your app users. The process is somewhat same. First, go to the settings section and look out for new application, or visit the link directly. Here, fill your app name and domain. The domain name should be localhost 3000 for our case. You can also add some description to describe your app, although this is completely optional. The next part is more important. Now set a callback URL for your app. This is a fixed route specific to Next Auth integration. So, look and observe each step carefully. Next Auth will use this callback URL to communicate with our app. Hence, make sure to write it exactly same. After this, register the new app and save the necessary credentials. Once the app is registered, you will get the client ID. Save it for future reference. Then generate the client secret using the given button. Again, copy and save this client's secret carefully. You will need both these values for the auth integration, but make sure to create your own O-Auth app and get these credentials. My credentials will not work for you. Don't use these in your app. Generating Auth app credentials is the first step of Auth integration. Next, we have to save these credentials in a specific and secure file. This is the .env.local file. Create a new file in the root of our app directory. It should be outside the src folder. Create this new special file and save the credentials as I'm doing. Here, we will save 3 unique values. First one is the GitHub client. Make sure you write the name and value correctly. The whole caps naming is the standard for environment variable. This format keeps these values unique and easily distinguishable. Similarly, save the client secret, and then save a random string called auth. The auth secret is the key that Next Auth use for token generation and session management. It should be something meaningful, although a random string will do the job for our case. Save this file, and the second step is done. After saving the env file, let's move on to the essential step. Next, we have to install the Next Auth library in our app. Along with it, we can add a few more libraries for the support. Although the latest Next Auth doc suggests we don't need the core part. Still, I'm installing it. Technically, we will never directly interact with this library, especially with the latest version of Next Auth. Another library that we will install is the Prisma adapter package. Again, it's a support package. We can work without it with some tweaks, but it helps. So let's use them all. It will take a few moments to install all these libraries. Once done, you can check them inside the node module folder. Now it's time to move on to the next step. It is the callback URL that we have saved in the O-Auth record. It's time to create that specific records. Those who are following my videos knows. Previously, I have already discussed the route structure for Next.js app in details. In simple words, it follows the standard directory stack to define the URL structure. Before working on the callback URL, let's add an auth handler that will regulate and process data transaction between the API and our app. Therefore, let's create a new file inside src directory called auth.ts. Continue by importing the Next Auth package, GitHub module from Next Auth GitHub library, and Prisma adapter package inside this new file. Also import the DB file that provides the Prisma client reference. Oh, sorry for this mistake. I forgot to add the DB folder during Prisma installation details. Let's add it now. Create a folder with name DB and put a new file called index.ts inside it. In this new file, import Prisma client and export the Prisma client instance as DB from this file. That's it. Save this file and continue editing the auth.ts file. Now, make a local copy of client ID and client secret. Use the process env reference to get the details from the local env file. It is a good practice to call and store these values locally to avoid multiple read requests. Although there is a small issue with this approach. The value in the local variable may be undefined. Suppose we made a spelling error in the call name, then there will be no such record available in the env file. Hence, we will get undefined in return. Therefore, to avoid any error later in the app run, let's sort this issue once and for all. Put an if check to determine if any one of these values is not available. I'm using the pipeline sign, that is the logical or operator to check both values. Basic knowledge of program logic is expected, else ping me for more details. On condition match, throw a specific error informing the user about the issue. Else continue with the usual program flow. Now, use the Next Auth method to get the necessary connection parameters. It will require some specific data to create the connection. First of all, add a provider key with an array value of GitHub. Here we can add multiple providers. You can check the official record for the entire list. Although I'm sure all the popular social platforms are there in the authentication provider list. We have used GitHub so far in our project, so let's use it here. The GitHub call will require a client ID and secret. Therefore, use the local variable to reference both these values. Next, add the callback record to this Next Auth component. It is an essential requirement for the Next Auth call. This method won't work without proper callback management. The main task of this callback is to maintain consistency with user authentication. This consistency is governed by proper session management. Therefore, add an async session call with 2 parameters inside the callback. Its first parameter is session, and the second one is the user record. The session call is similar to any standard function. Inside it, put an if check to determine session and user data is available. If it is present, then set the session user ID to the client ID. Otherwise, return the current session and callback. That's it. Just save the file and it's almost done. Up to now, we have installed Prisma, set up the database model, then we created an O-Auth app in GitHub. After that, we installed the Next Auth library and set up the auth requirements. Next, we have to handle the incoming data from the Next Auth provider. It can be done by spreading the return data into specific variables. The Next Auth method will provide for specific helpers. These are the specific functions that we will need for authentication and session management. The first one is the handler set. It will provide the get and post methods for data handling. Other 2 are the sign-in function and sign-out handler function. The last essential feature is the auth parameter for token generation. So spread the return value into these 4 variables. You must look for details in the official docs. Still, there is one parameter missing for the Next Auth call. It is the database adapter for which we will use the Prisma DB client. Okay, we have reached the final part of today's session. The author.ts file is ready and our app can communicate with the Next Auth server. But to get actual response, we have to define the required callback URL. Remember, we have saved a specific URL during O-Auth app creation. Now is the time to lay out that route. Here we have to create an API directory inside the app directory. Then inside it, create another directory called auth. Again, create a new dynamic route with Next Auth naming. The name of this directory will be enclosed inside a pair of square brackets along with 3 dots, which signifies the dynamic route name. This dynamic route will handle the API callback from Next Auth. We are using dynamic route instead of fixed GitHub naming. This will allow the reuse of this route from multiple providers. Finally, we have to define a route.ts file inside this dynamic directory. Inside it, we will export the actual get and post methods. Traditionally, we can define these as separate functions. Although we already have exported these built-in method for both get and post calls inside the auth.ts file. Hence, we only have to export these methods from auth route. That's it. Save the file and it's done. Now we are ready to implement the actual sign in and sign out methods in our app. We can directly call these methods from Next Auth. Although, it is better to create a server action specific to both these tasks. We will continue with server actions and much more in our next video. For now, it's complete. Let's wrap up today's works. We have started this video with Prisma installation and setup and ending it with Next Auth setup. I hope it's helpful, and if you find it interesting, then give it a like. subscribe my channel, and hit the notification bell for future updates. That's it for today's video. Stay tuned for the next session. See you soon in the next part. Till then, keep coding and keep learning. Don't forget to write your thoughts and comment. Thanks for watching TechnoSpace.